Hello. Today we'll be ranking every talisman in Elden Ring. Now this video took me a pretty long time to make. It was like 5 months or so. So be sure to like the video if you enjoy it and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Because at 1,000 subscribers I'll be doing a face reveal. Sorry, I don't know how that keeps happening. Editor, please cut that out. And I do not think I'll be ever doing a video this long structured like this, as the editing process will take way too long. So I think if I'll be ranking all the talismans again, I think I'll be doing it in a tier list, which seems much easier to me. For the shorter videos, maybe I'll do it in a format similar to this still. And given that this took me about 4 or 5 months, there may be some inconsistencies here and there. I apologize for that. But without further ado, enjoy the video. And at number 80 we have Dedekar's Woe, which I believe is the only talisman in the game with strictly a negative effect. All this talisman does is it doubles damage taken by the player. This is by design and it's supposed to make the game more difficult. And unlike the Sword Seals and the Scorpion Charms, this does not provide any positive effect. And at number 79 we have Crepice's Vial, which has the effect to eliminate all sound made by the wearer during movement. Apparently this helps you sneak up on enemies in the open world, but even if it does, it's definitely not a vital mechanic in Elden Ring and is not going to help you fight any bosses. I mean, you could try to sneak up on people since it does say it eliminates all sound, as I'm assuming that's all audio that you do make. So maybe if you really wanted to put this to use, you can try to do some invades and try to sneak up on people. But considering it's a very open world, you'll have to do this in very specific areas to make the Crepice's Vial, do anything, since they'll most likely see you anyways. But yeah, stealth isn't very important and there are better talismans you can use to sneak up on people in invasions. And at number 78 we have the Crucible Talisman, which reduces the damage of headshots. It also reduces the hit stun of headshots. Now a headshot is when you get hit in the head with a projectile, namely a crossbow bolt or arrow from a bow. Now this may also include projectiles from certain spells, but even if it does, it is dog water. It's trash. Next talisman. And at number 77 we have the Longtail Cat Talisman, which grants immunity to fall damage but does not prevent death from a high fall. Now I remember people getting tricked by its item description because it used to say something like renders the wearer immune to fall damage, which was a bit misleading as it led people to just jump off cliffs and die, thinking they would be completely safe because it said they would be immune to fall damage. Now all the Longtail Cat Talisman does is prevent you from taking damage anywhere before the 20-meter mark, where normally I believe you'd start taking full damage about at the 16-meter mark, and this would prevent that. Now why this talisman is ranked so low is no secret. As far as I know, this is useless in any boss battles, is probably not going to help you in PvP, and would only prevent you from taking damage that you should have probably avoided taking otherwise, or you could just heal it off. But I could see why you might swap to this talisman real quick before taking some fall damage, in which case it is not really the worst talisman, but it's very far from the best. Now on to number 76, which is the Sacrificial Twig, which prevents rune loss upon death, but itself will be sacrificed when you die. Multiple of these can be found. It is not like there is only one singular sacrificial twig in the world, and this is meant to be a safeguard against losing your runes, like maybe you could put it on before you enter a boss battle. However, its applications are not super helpful, as it grants no other benefit other than preventing the rune loss. Like say you die in the open world and lose your runes. Instead of using this talisman, you could just go pick them up and start where you left off. And if you're trying to use it before you enter a boss battle, instead of bringing the sacrificial twig, you could just go pick up your runes, and after that just quit out and you'll end up at the Frawgue Gate. Really all the sacrificial twig does is save you some time, maybe, and is really only recommended if you really have nothing else. Now at number 75 we have Shibri's Woe, which has a bit of a misleading description. Now what it says is it constantly attracts enemies' aggression. Now it turns out this means nothing in PvE, at least not when you're alone. What this does is if you are playing multiplayer and you are say fighting a boss with your friends and you are wearing this talisman, the boss will prioritize you over the other players. Now this could be great if you're just trying to shield your teammates from the boss's attacks, but it's not guaranteed to help your host out, as all bosses seem to have giant AoE attacks nowadays. Personally, it doesn't seem too helpful, even for its one use in the game. And if you wanted to help your host be a boss, you could instead pick a real talisman instead. And at number 74 we have the Crucible Feather Talisman, which increases the effectiveness of dodge rolls but increases damage taken. Now by the effectiveness of dodge rolls, I believe it means it will add iframes, but the big problem is how much extra damage that you take. Apparently it's a 30% damage increase, which is quite a lot of damage for what, a few iframes? Now this talisman definitely could be higher depending on how many iframes it gives, but considering you just take so much extra damage, I can't really see it being much higher than this. And at number 73 we have the Ancestral Spirit's Horn, which will restore 3 FP for every enemy you kill. This is one of those talismans for helping you sustain throughout just exploring the world, and I would say that this is probably the worst one. And yeah, I really don't have too much to talk about this talisman. And at number 72, we have the Assassin's Cerulean Dagger, which is quite similar to the Ancestor Spirit's Horn. However, unlike the Spirit's Horn, this can be used in a multitude of boss battles. Now, what the Assassin's Cerulean Dagger does is it will restore 15 FP per critical hit. Now, it turns out you might get twice as much FP if you get a double critical hit, which is where if the crit animation damages them twice, but that's not really what this is about. I would place this over the Spirit's Horn because I believe boss battles are a more critical time compared to the open world. In the middle of a fight, you can go ahead and crit a weakened boss, which can restore some FP, which can be nice, I guess. It's just that the effect is pretty weak, and that is why it is ranked as low as it is. Now, for our 67 to 71 spots, we will have the Horn Charms and the Mottled Necklace, which all have their +1 versions, and the Prince of Death's Sis. The Mottled Necklace +1, probably being one of the better ones, raises immunity, robustness, and focus by 60, which is the most total stat gain compared to all of them. The Prince of Death's Sis, raising vitality by 140. The Immunizing Horn Charm, increasing immunity by 140. The Stalwart Horn Charm, increasing robustness by 140, and the Clarifying Horn Charm, which increases focus by 140. Now, these might be helpful if you're trying to counter a specific status effect, like say you enter a poison cave, so you take whatever stat would increase your poison immunity. It could be for a bunch of things like Scarlet Rot, Bleed, Death, etc. Honestly, these talismans are kind of meh, and I'm not really too sure how much better they are than some of the other spots before them, but I can be happy with where they are at the moment. Next up, we have the Moon of Noxtella, which will increase your memory slots by 2, which might be more helpful in the earlier game before you have too many spell slots. And honestly, that's all I have good to say about it. Honestly, since you get this about in the mid to late game, you should have a decent amount of memory slots by then. So it's not really the best thing ever, but obviously having more memory slots is not a bad thing. At number 65, we have the Taker's Cameo that heals 3% of max HP and a flat 30 HP every kill. Now this can be done with the Spirit's Horn as well, but if you watch a Bloodstain and wait until they die, you will also gain the benefit of the kill when they die in the Bloodstain. You could effectively heal off by watching Bloodstains. Now the problem is this is just a bit of free sustain when roaming throughout the world and is not super necessary when you just have flasks. I do feel like there are better things, however, it is not the worst thing if this is all you have. Now at number 64, we have the Blue Feathered Branch Sword, which activates under 20% health, and when it activates, it will actually reduce your damage negation by 50% and then add a plus 50 bonus to your defense. And plus 50 is actually a lot. I'm not really too sure if you can get a lower damage negation after the branch sword is activated, but I'm pretty sure that you can't. So it will always be a benefit. And plus 50 is usually no joke, especially at lower levels. So if an attack doesn't just immediately kill you, this will proc and hopefully let you survive another attack. Now the problem is if you get hit for 50% and then by 50% again, this effect will never go off and it will be useless, being a dead talisman, which is really why I don't like the branch swords, but I do see the red one being more useful for certain situations, which I will get to when I get to it. But yeah, very situational, although a pretty good buff, and will almost assure that you do survive another attack. And at number 63, we have the Crucible Scale Talisman, which reduces damage taken from critical hits by an amount. Yeah, I'm not really too sure if everyone really cares enough about these talismans to give out the actual values of their effects. Now the reason I put this above the Crucible Not Talisman is that critical hits are much more common than, say, headshots, despite neither really being common at all. If there's some lunatic out there with a parry shield for some reason, then you have the perfect thing to counter him. Maybe swap out one of your other talismans for this talisman and watch them tremble as you're still getting critically hit or a massive chunk of damage. But yeah, obviously the big problem is crits are not very common. People do not really parry anymore, as PvP is really just weapon art and spell spam galore, and taking critical hits from PvE creatures is not really too common. Although it is something niche that can be used, in that I will give it its value. Now at number 61 and 62, we have the Furled Fingers Trick Mirror and the Host Trick Mirror. The Furled Fingers Trick Mirror allowing you to take the appearance of a host, and the Host Trick Mirror allowing you to take the appearance of a cooperator. Now the niche of these talismans are very interesting. The idea behind these talismans is to trick enemy invaders into focusing the wrong person, and hopefully that will allow the host to survive. There's one issue with this, however, and that being that the invader is literally told the name of the host as soon as they join the session. So if they just remember the names, this could end up just being useless. I would consider the Furled Fingers Trick Mirror to be better than the host trick mirror, because it also has another niche of actually making you look like a host, which actually doesn't make you like glow at all. And this can also be used by invaders in order to sneak in and sneak up on the host without showing off your blinding red light. And yeah, I think they add a fun gameplay element to the game, so they will be taking the 61 and 62 spots. And at number 60, we have Primal Glinstone Blade, which reduces spell cost by 25%, which is pretty good. You'll be able to cast more spells without having to drink another Cerulean flask. However, this does come with a downside. It also decreases your max health by 15%, which is quite the downside for something that could have helped with spellcasting builds. Honestly, if the max HP loss was like 5%, that would increase this talisman's viability significantly, making it a lot more niche, but still usable. So it'll be taking the 60th spot. And at number 59, we have the Lance Talisman, which increased the damage of melee attacks on horseback by 15%, which is actually a significant boost, and fighting on horseback isn't the worst thing ever. Fighting larger enemies, or enemies that also ride on horses while on horseback, is actually quite viable, and this can improve that viability. But this is basically as niche as it gets. You could definitely play the whole game without fighting on horseback, so it'll be taking the 59th spot. At number 58, we have the Ritual Shield Talisman, which reduces damage taken by 30% while you're at full health. This talisman is basically the oh crap, I'm gonna get one shot, let's put this on talisman, which may help with fighting bosses and honestly might deserve a bit higher spot than this. But I like genuinely only see this useful in like level 1 runs where you have the highest chance of being one shot. It's quite conditional, but it's actually a solid buff, so it'll be taking the 58th spot. And at number 57, we have the Carrion Filigreed Crest, which lowers the FP cost consumed by skills by 25%, which is very solid, especially for skills that take up a large chunk of FP. And this can help compensate your mind stat a little bit, but usually skills do not cost too much FP. Now 25% is a good bit and is the same as the Primal Glinstone Blade. However, it is only higher because the Primal Glinstone Blade takes a maximum HP cost, as the FP consumed by skills is not all that important, generally speaking. Like if the Primal Glinstone Blade did not have a maximum HP cost, it would probably be top 20, because FP consumption by spells is quite significant. However, by skills, not so much. Honestly, it's probably personal bias why this is so low. However, I just don't think it is very necessary. However, being able to spam Lightning Ram as much as you want does seem like a quite fun way to use this talisman. At number 55 and 56, we have the Companion Jar and the Perfumer's Talisman. The Companion Jar increases the damage dealt by Cracked Pot and Ritual Pot consumables by 20%, and the Perfumer's Talisman increased the damage of Spark Perfume by, I believe, also 20%. Now, I'm not gonna lie, these talismans are actually pretty bad, but the 20% increase is quite significant, especially when paired with the Pothead item that I am currently wearing. I guess it could be interesting if you wanted to do any throwable item builds. Honestly, these should probably be down a few more spots, but the 20% increase is what brings them here. And at number 54, we have the Roar Medallion, which will increase the effectiveness of roars. This increases the damage of Beast Roar, Troll's Roar, and the Starcaller Cry, as well as the damage of heavy attacks, after you buff with War Cry, Barbaric Roar, and Shriek of Melos. And all of these increases are by 15%, which is quite significant. The real reason that it is up as high as it is that it is affected by the War Cry skill and others like it, allowing you to deal more damage with heavy attacks, which can be quite significant against bosses and such, and has some other niche uses here and there. Honestly, it's a fun little talisman. I'd recommend trying it if you ever wanted to like smash a boss in 2 hits. And at number 53, we have the Blue Dancer Charm, which will increase your damage based on how low your equip load is. It'll increase your physical damage by about 5, 10, 15% depending on how low your equipment load is. And apparently it'll scale at 20, 16, and 8 equipment load, which is quite light, which really does hurt the viability of this talisman, as generally you'll want better armor so that you can take more hits. But yeah, still it should be a significant power boost and can help out if you're trying to kill bosses quickly, or if you're planning on traveling light regardless. In order to get those light rolls, you might run this charm. However, there are enough flaws with it that it's really just not worth running in most cases. But yeah, it does have the niche and glass cannon built, and it's not too horrible, so it'll be taking the 53 spot. At number 52, we have the Twin Blade Talisman, which increased the damage of the final hit of a chain by 20%. So this would be most effective on weapons with a quick chain of attacks, which I believe the Twin Blade is actually pretty quick itself, doing just that. But this talisman's hard to gauge as it is really just the final hit that is increased in damage. But it's a good chunk, it's 20%. Honestly, I wouldn't really recommend this in PvP, but this might be a bit handy in boss battles, as you're getting extra damage if you are able to stick on the boss and keep smacking them. A very interesting talisman, but I do not think it is too powerful, so it will be taking the 52nd spot. And at number 51, we have the Spear Talisman, which increases the damage of thrusting weapon counterattacks by 15%. So what a thrusting weapon counterattack is when you hit someone with a thrusting attack while they're also in an attack animation, increasing the damage dealt, rewarding good timing and spacing. Now what this talisman does is increase the damage of that counterattack. Now the problem with this talisman is that counterattacks are unique to thrust attacks, which are a specific type of damage. Something good for this talisman is that not all thrust attacks are made by thrusting weapons. weapons, or at least weapons that you would expect to have a thrust, like say a spear. Thrusting attacks can also be found on other weapons, like how many straight swords have a thrusting attack when they're one-handed and use the heavy attack. The damage boost is pretty solid and might be pretty viable if you like your spears and rapiers, so we'll be taking the 51st spot. And at number 50 we have the Arrow Sting Talisman, which increases the damage of arrows and bolts by 10%. This charm just being a generic damage boost for all sorts of crossbows and bows. I mean, even if you're not trying to snipe people down, crossbows and bows can see use in close quarters combat, especially crossbows since they can be taken up one-handed and paired with another weapon. Still, it's nothing crazy. It might be viable in some cases, but I definitely don't see this talisman every day. And at number 49 we have the Assassin's Crimson Dagger, which will heal you for more than 10% whenever you crit. Now this is another one of those sustain talismans, but I find this to be one of the better ones, especially considering that you can get this pretty early game. But what's nice about this talisman is it can be used pretty effectively in boss battles, as eventually I'm sure you'll be able to deal enough poise damage to stagger them and crit them in the middle of the fight, healing a good chunk of HP when you need it the most. However, critical hits usually only happen once or twice during a boss battle, and it doesn't give too much sustain, but it can save you from using a flask, which in the early game can be quite helpful, as you don't have too many, and that's why it'll be taking the 49th spot. And at number 48 we have the Godskin Swaddling Cloth. And very similarly to the Crimson Dagger is a talisman that gives sustain during a certain form of damage. With the Swaddling Cloth, that'll be through successive hits, rewarding continuous attacks. Now again, I would find this to be most helpful during boss battles, and can help you sustain through battles quite nicely, especially if you're dual wielding weapons. Now I only put this over the Crimson Dagger as it is a bit more consistent, but only for certain weapons, and most usually when you're dual wielding. And because of that, it is not that far ahead, and I do not find sustain to be overly powerful, but just like the Crimson Dagger, it can help you with flask usage, which can be quite nice. And at number 47 we have the Rotten Winged Insignia, which very similarly to the Swaddling Cloth has an effect with successive attacks. However, instead of healing you, it will increase your attack power. However, this procs more often than the Swaddling Cloth, and it's not restricted to weapon classes. So how this talisman works is it has tiers. It'll gain a stack after 3 hits, increasing damage with each stack up to a maximum of 3 stacks. The first stack increases damage by 6%, the second increasing it by 2%, and the third increasing it by 5%, up to a maximum of 13% extra damage. Now the problem is you'll have to maintain these stacks, which is not always a huge issue, but it can be against certain bosses. And in order to get these stacks easily, it's nice to dual wield weapons that are rather light and attack pretty fast, like dual wielding scimitars or daggers. This talisman is top tier if you're able to maintain all the stacks. However, if not, it becomes quite useless, so it'll be taking the 47th spot. And at number 46 we have the Arrow's Reach Talisman. This talisman increases the effective range of bows, crossbows, great bows, and ballistas, pretty much any ranged weapon. But why is it ranked above the Arrow's Sting Talisman, you might be asking, since that also increases the effectiveness of bows? Well, the reason is that this also increases the range of certain spells and skills. The big one for me being Bestial Sling, which is a pretty solid incantation, and when you increase the range of it, I'm sure its effectiveness is increased a decent bit. It does affect some other stuff, but that one is indeed my favorite. And because it provides more utility than to just bows, it will be taking the 46th spot. And at number 45, we have the Concealing Veil. This allows you to become invisible after a certain distance away from foes while crouching. And as far as trying to sneak up on people goes, this is probably one of the best ones. This doesn't let you try to blend into anything, it just makes you completely invisible. However, you do have to be crouched. This talisman may make it way easier to sneak up on someone. You just swap to it like while invading, and then little crouch towards them while trying to find the host. You find them, you take it off and you fight, right? Maybe thanks to this talisman you'll get some extra sneak attack in or something, I don't know. Honestly, the value of this talisman is your imagination and what you think you can do with it. However, it is not just inherently strong, so it will be taking the 45th spot. And at number 44, we have the Cursed Sword Talisman. This talisman increases the damage of guard counters by 20%. Now, if you don't know what a guard counter is, I actually didn't before making this video. It's when after you block with a shield, you use the heavy attack button and you'll use a counter attack, which does a decent chunk of damage. On the wiki, it says it's comparable to a charged heavy attack, and it requires precise timing. The Curved Sword Talisman will increase the damage of this guard counter attack. Personally, I've never seen anybody actually use this, like an actual person. And in PvP, when you have to account for lag and stuff, it's hard to, like, nicely time anything. But I'm sure you could use this in PvE to a certain degree of effectiveness. I'm honestly not too sure how good guard counters are, but I'm sure it's difficult enough to pull off in PvP matches, therefore it'll be going to the 44th spot for now. And at number 43, we have the Dagger Talisman. This talisman increases the damage of critical hits by 17%. A critical hit counts as whenever you backstab a creature or person, or whenever you riposte a creature or person. Now, this is another one of those things you don't really see in PvP. Basically, backstabs are impossible online with lag and whatnot, and parrying can be difficult for the same reason. Critical hits just don't really feel the same in this game as they did in Dark Souls 3, therefore this will be taking the 43rd spot. And at number 42, we have the Old Lord's Talisman. This increases the duration of spells by 30%. Now do keep in mind this is only spells, you can't use this with Ashes of War, and unique skills and the like. However, this can be fairly helpful. A whole 30% is a decent bit longer than the original durations. This can affect healing spells like the healing regeneration spells, those will last for longer so you'll heal for more. This can affect damage, this can affect all the incantations that can buff you, and that's about it. Maybe something to consider if you like buffing, but that's basically all the use that you'll get out of it. And at number 41, we'll have the Axe Talisman. This talisman increases the damage of heavy attacks by 10%, and this is only the charged version of the heavy attack. I highly doubt this sees use in PvP, however in PvE, actually fighting bosses and whatnot, heavy attacks, especially charged heavy attacks, do a ton of staggering, like a bunch of poise damage, and this can really help with that. I've seen speedrunners, try, I think it was Distortion that did a level 1 run that I watched. He used the Serpent Hunter Spear, I think, and he only used charge heavy attacks. So I know this has a use and might honestly be pretty worth it, as heavy attacks on their own are already slow, and charging the heavy attack is almost worse, unless you're trying to catch someone out, but this only increases the damage by 10%, so it's like hard to gauge. So this will be taking the 41st spot. At number 40, we have Millicent's Prosthesis, and yes, that is how you say prosthesis, I just looked it up. This talisman increases your dexterity by 5 and increases the attack power with successive attacks, much like the Rotten Sword Insignia. However, unlike the Insignia, this will increase your attack by slightly less amounts, I think like 1% for each tier less than the Rotten Sword Insignia. However, you do get that dexterity of 5, which probably increases your damage anyways, especially if it's a dexterity weapon. Honestly, that's really it. It has the same benefits as the Rotten Sword Insignia, but you get that plus 5 dexterity. So it will be taking the 40th spot. And at number 39, we have the Godfrey Icon. This increases the damage of spells and skills that are charged by 15%. 15% is a solid increase. However, it is only affecting charged spells and skills, so you would have to charge a spell or skill that actually can be charged and then reap this benefit from that. This affects all sorts of spells and skills. However, I just don't think it's like super good, like especially since you're trying to charge it. Like unless you were already planning on charging it beforehand, I do not think that this will add too much, because usually you want it to be faster, not slower. But this can go into those spots where like maybe you charge it to get that, like to catch your opponent off guard in PvP. When you do hit them with that charge spell, it does a ton of damage. But honestly, I think that this gets more value in PvE, where you fight bosses and whatnot, and then you'll get the most damage out of your charged spells and skills already, and with the Godfrey Icon that will be even more so. So I think it will be much more worth it in PvE, very similarly to say the Axe Talisman, but this is by 15% and affects a good variety of spells and skills, which might already be super helpful for the PvE environment. So it's very flexible, but it's not quite as helpful in that PvP environment, if you know what I mean. That'll be taking the 39th spot. And at number 38, we have the Hammer Talisman. This talisman increases the stamina damage against blocking enemies by 20%. The problem with this talisman is that your opponent needs to have a shield for this to work. If we're assuming that all enemies have shields, then maybe this might be one of the best talisman ever, because 20 extra stamina damage will do a significant chunk to their stamina bar and will help you break their guard more easily. However, the truth is not everyone is bringing a shield. If you see someone with a shield, you can just put this on, to be fair, but even then it is just 20% stamina damage, and it's still a case-by-case basis. I don't personally think you'll see too much use of this in the PvE environment, but if you see someone with a shield in PvP, maybe you just slap this on and you have a bit of fun with them. However, this talisman will be taking the 38th spot. And at number 37 and 36, we have the Cerulean Seed Talisman and the Crimson Seed Talisman. Each of these increases the restoration of their respective flask by 20%. Honestly, usually your FP gauge is maxed out and will be increased to the fullest with one blue Estus flask. I don't even remember what you call these now. The Flask of Cerulean Tears. So maybe this one's not quite as helpful as, say, something like the Crimson Seed Talisman. But yeah, these talismans are like, okay, you don't really use these in PvP because healing in PvP is pretty looked down upon. Therefore, in PvE, you will get the most use out of this. You might be able to fully heal yourself with one flask using this talisman, so that could be a great benefit, and it would greatly reduce the amount of blasts you would need for each fight, or just have the most amount of healing available. So these are some solid talismans, and they will be taking the 37th and 36th spot. And at number 35, we have the Red Feathered Branch Sword. When your HP is below 20%, your attack power will increase by 20%. That is a very substantial boost. The problem is the condition. Getting to 20% it can be quite difficult and or inconsistent. You can try to intentionally proc this by using the Seppuku Ash of War or maybe something like Bloody Slash. This is more of a speedrunner's talisman, as staying at less than 20 HP can be quite risky, but rewarding if you're running the Red Feathered Branch Sword. If paired with the Blue Feathered Branch Sword, you may also be able to take another hit, depending on how much health you have left. Honestly, I don't recommend this for general play, but it can be used by speedrunners and is more of a for fun talisman. But hey, it has use, so it'll be taking the 35th spot. And at number 34, we have the Blessed Do Talisman. In my opinion, this is the best talisman used for sustain. The Blessed Do Talisman restores 2 health every second, which is incredibly slowly, but it can be quite significant over time, especially at the early parts of the game. I'd only really recommend this for boss battles, as those can last a good bit of time sometimes, or just when you're traveling the world of Elden Ring, as at lower levels the health regeneration can be quite significant, but later on it does seem to fall off quite hard. For reference, it would take about 13 or 14 minutes to fully heal a character with 40 vigor. That is a long time. And seeing that your average duel in Elden Ring lasts like half a minute, this has little to no use in PvP, especially at the higher levels. Overall, it's okay, so it'll be taking the 34th spot. And at numbers 32 and 33, we have Radagon's Sword Seal and Marika's Sword Seal, of which each raises 4 stats by 5 and increases the damage taken by 15%. Radagon's Sword Seal increasing the Vigor, Endurance, Strength, and Dexterity by 5, and Marika's Sword Seal increasing the Mind, Intelligence, Faith, and Arcane by 5. Radagon's usually being the better of the two, increasing both Vigor and Endurance, which are pretty necessary stats, as well as Strength and Dexterity, which coincide each other pretty well. Whereas if you took Marika's Sword Seal, all you gain is 5 Mind and a mishmash of Intelligence, Faith, and Arcane, which, unless you're planning on using all 3, does not seem all that beneficial, and you'd be better off using one of the talismans that are higher up on this list. However, these stat gains can be pretty beneficial, especially at the early game, considering that they are flat stat boosts. However, you aren't really getting these all that early game, more towards the mid to late game. But you may have the Scar Seals, which are the lesser versions, which give you 3 points in each stat. However, you take 10% more damage. A little bit weaker, but you might be able to find them a bit quicker. However, these talisman drop off quicker than any other talisman, and I swear they seem to become useless by like level 60, though they will be taking the 32nd and 33rd spots. And for numbers 27 through 31, we have the Drake Talismans, each one decreasing the damage taken from a specific type of non-physical damage, except the Pearl Drake Talisman, which is a blanket for all non-physical damage. And I do believe the Pearl Drake to be the most useful, as it shields you against all of it, however at a decreased amount. I see the Pearl Drake Talisman to be rather similar to the Dragon Crest Grey Shield Talisman, however not as much, and I find physical to be more important than non-physical. However, they're not usually bad to have, so they will be going here. And at number 25, we have the Cerulean Amber Medallion. Out of the Amber Medallions, I would consider this to be the worst of the 3. This talisman increases your focus point maximum by 11%. This can help you forego some levels into Mind. However, generally it is not worth using a talisman slot to do so. However, as far as spellcasting builds go, you may not have much of a choice, if you wanted to get more focus points for your spells without having to dump a bunch of Mind. The only other talisman that can help with this is the Primal Glinstone Blade, which is not nearly as optimal outside of one-shot builds, because you'll take a massive reduction to your maximum HP. And it can be hard to dump a bunch of points into Mind when you're trying to invest in some sort of spellcasting stat. So it's got its niche, so it'll be taking the 26th spot. And at number 25, we have the Claw Talisman. This increases the damage of jump attacks by 15%. This is a pretty significant boost to a pretty common form of damage. However, personally, I do not find jump attacks to be common enough and your main source of damage to run this talisman all the time. However, it is still very solid, and it'll likely help you in any fight. That's really all I have to say about this talisman, so it'll be taking the 25th spot. And at numbers 21 through 24, we have the Scorpion Charms. These increase their respective form of damage by 12%, but increases the amount of damage you take by 10%. And do note that these are nerfed in PvP, where you will deal 8% of the respective damage, but take 15% more damage, which is significantly worse for your PvP bros. And honestly, because of that, I would not recommend these these in PvP. However, in PvE, this can help you kill things quicker without too much of a downside. Honestly, that's pretty much it. They're just pretty good, and they cover the 4 elements, so they'll be here. And at number 20, we have the Great Shield Talisman. This talisman reduces the amount of stamina damage you take while shielding by 10%. This talisman can be rather helpful for those players that like to run a Great Shield and a thrusting weapon, such as a rapier or spear, which is a build that allows you to attack and defend. The main weakness of the build is the amount of stamina that you lose, and the Great Shield Talisman can help you with just that. The build itself can be rather annoying, albeit effective, and the Great Shield Talisman can help with this kind of build, so it'll be taking the 20th spot. And at number 19, we have the Bull Goat's Talisman. This talisman seems to increase your poise by 33%, however it reduces your poise damage by 25%. It's weird. However, that is a hefty chunk to your poise effectiveness, and poise can be a rather valuable stat to have, especially in PvP. Poise can be a rather valuable stat in Elden Ring PvP, as you will be able to attack without being interrupted. So as long as you're able to stay on top of your enemy, you can hit them non-stop. And high poise is further accentuated through the Bull Goat's Talisman. Just a very good talisman in PvP, however in PvE, you sometimes don't want to make those kinds of trades, making it a little bit less valuable in PvE. So it'll be taking the number 19th spot. And for numbers 15 through 18, we have the Heirloom Talismans. Each of these talismans will increase strength, dexterity, intelligence, or faith by 5. These can be pretty handy if you ever need a little extra stat boost here or there. And I find these to be plenty more valuable than the Sword Seal Talismans, since usually you only want an increase to a few stats, and these don't come with a damage reduction decrease. Something I noticed when making this video was that the Prosthesis Wearer Heirloom also increases the dexterity by 5, which is the same amount as Millicent's Prosthesis. However, Millicent's Prosthesis also has its other effect. So yes, I would recommend Millicent's Prosthesis over this Heirloom. However, despite that, these are all very good and can be used in almost any build, so I will be putting them here. And at number 14, we have the Greyjar's Arsenal. This talisman increases your equip load by 19%. Now this is a very solid increase in weight, which can be a rather good stat to have. However, this may be a personal thing for me, but I tend to put a chunk of endurance on my builds, as it increases both your stamina and your weight, and generally it is enough for me. However, if you do want to use heavier weapons, as well as some heavier armor, this can just help you get the right amount of equip load without being too heavy, so this will be taking the 14th spot. And at number 13, we have the Ritual Sword Talisman. This talisman increases your attack power by 10% when your health is at maximum. Now hear me out on this one, as this may be a surprise that this is this high. Getting a flat attack power buff can be quite hard to come by, and getting an attack power buff while you're at your safest, being at max health, makes this a much better alternative to the red feathered branch sword in a general sense. This talisman can be used in PvE and PvP, however it is more useful in PvE, as if you get damaged you can heal yourself back to full, which is not something you'll be doing in a duel. And hey, it's a 10% attack power boost, who doesn't want it? So it'll be taking the number 13th spot. And at number 12, we have the Viridian Amber Medallion. This talisman increases your stamina by 15%, which is another stat that can be helped by increasing the endurance stat, much like the Greyjar's Arsenal. And the only reason this isn't higher is because it is outclassed by a couple talismans that are higher in this list. Otherwise, I love stamina, I can't get enough of it. This will be taking the number 12th spot. And at number 10 and number 11, we have the Lord of Blood's Exaltation and the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation. The Lord of Blood's Exaltation raising attack power by 20% for 20 seconds when a blood loss occurs, also known as a bleed proc, and the Kindred of Rot increasing attack power by 20% for 20 seconds when poisoning or rot occurs in the vicinity, being a poison proc or a scarlet rot proc. Now these talismans can be very effective, but only when running certain builds. Usually arcane builds make the most use out of this, as it pairs best with bleed and poison, and I do not think scarlet rot can be affected by any one stat. And although it would take a few hits to get them going, a 20% boost is nothing to scoff at. Lord of Blood's Exaltation likely being the better of the two, as bleed procs are instant and can be used repeatedly. A common way to proc Lord of Blood's Exaltation in duels is to use the Ash of War Seppuku, which also gives you an attack boost after dealing damage to yourself. Now, my problem with these talismans in PvP is by the time you get a bleed, poison, or scarlet rot proc, they're likely already going to die in the next couple hits anyways, and the attack power boost doesn't mean too much. However, these are some of the most broken PvE talismans out there. If the enemy can be affected by these status effects, you should be able to shred through the boss with your increased attack power. And shredding through certain bosses is something that bleed builds do already really well. They are amazing talismans by their own right for PvE alone, so they'll be taking the 10 and 11 spots.
At number 9, the Radigon Icon.
Now before I talk about this talisman, I will explain a little bit on how dexterity affects spell casting. Increasing your dexterity will shorten the time of casting a spell. You could say, wow, that was a good explanation, Frawgue. I know. I know it is. Increasing dexterity for decreased spellcasting time is much like increasing dexterity for damage. It has a decreased return on investment the higher you go. And the Radagon icon will give you quote-unquote virtual dexterity, which is used for just spellcasting, as opposed to just giving you dexterity. It will give you a flat amount of 30 virtual dexterity, which is a solid chunk, but it is a flat amount. Therefore, if you have high dexterity already, it will be less effective. Whereas if you have, say, 10 dexterity, it will be more effective, as that will be increased to 40, as there is a bigger difference between 10 and 40 as there is between 40 and 70, therefore not being quite as helpful in high dexterity builds, but the shortened casting time can be nice regardless. And from what I understand, if you have a lower dexterity, let's say around like 10, if you equip the Radagon icon, your casting time will increase by around 10%, which is very significant. But do please note that this does not work with the Dragon Communion incantations, but keeping that in mind, the Radagon icon can be useful for most spellcasting builds, and it'll be taking the number 9 spot. And at number 7 and number 8, we have the Graven Mass and Frawgue's Canvas Talismans. The Graven Mass Talisman increasing the potency of sorceries by 8%, and the Frawgue's Canvas Talisman increasing the potency of incantations by 8%. Unfortunately, these values do not contribute to buffs or healing or anything like that. These values are only additive to damaging spells. However, some spells can be very good in both PvE and PvP, making these talismans very flexible for both roles. Now, the 8% might not be too much, but it can be widely applied. Overall, very good talismans and are basically necessary in any spellcasting build, all unless you only like to heal or buff yourself up with spells, and these will not become useful at all, so these will be taking the 7 and 8 spots. And above them, at number 6, we have the Shard of Alexander, which increases the damage of skills by 15%. Much like spells, skills can be applied in a variety of ways, some being as simple as the kick skill, or being as broken as the corpse piler skill. Yes, the one on Rivers of Blood. Now, 15% is a significant boost in damage, and skills can be applied to a great variety of many things. Definitely a favorite, this will be taking the number 6 spot. Okay, so I actually messed up this tier list a little bit, so I'll be using 2 talismans to take up 1 slot, as that would be much easier than remaking the entire list. So at number 5, we will have both the Crimson Amber Medallion and the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. Crimson Amber Medallion, being the best of the Amber Medallions in my opinion, increases your maximum HP by 8%, and the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman will reduce the amount of damage you take by physical damage by 20%. Normally, the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman is so much better than the Crimson Amber Medallion, except there's a catch to the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. It is significantly weaker in PvP, where its effectiveness is instead 5% over the 20%. So in my opinion, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman is a must-have in PvE, whereas it will get outclassed by the Crimson Amber Medallion in PvP. Both are very nice in their respective places, and you can even combine them if you want to, especially the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman in PvE, as that will increase your survivability immensely. Both are very good and will make you much tankier, so both will be taking the number 5 spot. I apologize again for messing up the list. And at number 3 and number 4, we have the Gold Scarab and the Silver Scarab. The Gold Scarab increasing the amount of runes you obtain by 20%, and the Silver Scarab increasing your item discovery by 75%. Now, increasing the amount of runes you get just throughout your playthrough, even if it is just by 20%, can be very good for you. Increasing your item discovery by 75%, which is almost doubling your item discovery by the way, can make grinding for certain weapons or armor much easier. There are also the consumable items called the Foul Foots, which can either increase your rune acquisition or your item discovery as well, and if combined with the scarabs, can make grinding for runes or items much easier and so much quicker. Now, these have no value in PvP, however they can be so integral to your average playthrough, which is why I brought them up this high. So the scarabs will be taking the number 3 and 4th spots. And at number 2, the second best talisman in the game will be the Green Turtle Talisman. Green Turtle Talisman will increase your stamina recovery speed by almost 18%. Now, stamina is such an important tool for any fight, and the fact that this talisman lets you get it back faster is kind of bonkers, regardless of if you're fighting a boss or your best friend. And that is it. It is a very simple but effective talisman. It will be the second best talisman in Elden Ring. And even better than that, in the number 1 spot, the best talisman in Elden Ring, it should come to no surprise, I will be choosing the Erdtree's Favor. This talisman actually does 3 things. It increases your HP by 4%, it increases your stamina by almost 10%, and it increases your equip load by 8%. All 3 of these stats are very good and can help you in both PvE and PvP. And because of this, it outclasses the Viridian Amber Medallion, of which the Green Turtle Talisman also does. Another very simple talisman, it just makes your character better. So yes, I do consider this to be the best talisman in Elden Ring. And that was every talisman in Elden Ring. Again, this took me a long time to make, so if you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and comment down below what your favorite talisman is. And yeah, I don't think I'll be making a video like this again with its format and length. I think it'd be much easier to just make a tier list. Hey, I can stream that too, so be sure to check out my Twitch, as I plan on doing a shield only run on there pretty soon. And yeah, that'll be it for me. Have a good one.